this discussion, and I hope you find it quite interesting. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Joseph Kerski.
Well, many thanks, Kristen, and greetings all. Joseph Kerski here. I am going to just invite you folks to put on several hats here during this presentation. One, I know many of you are researchers. I know many of you are educators, either in a formal educational setting or you're perhaps responsible for training your fellow employees, your staff, your board of directors, others. I'm just going to cut right to the heart of it here, folks. I truly appreciate being invited to share the following with your community. There's a lot of people in our world that want to change things, want to change the world, make our communities and our regions, our provinces, our states, our countries more sustainable, more equitable, more resilient. But you folks are actually doing it in the GIS community. You really are, piece by piece, parcel by parcel, species by species, water quality test by water quality test. You're making our communities a better place to be. So I have enormous respect for you all in the GIS community, and I really appreciate being invited here today. You're looking at my story map, the 5 forces, 5 trends, and 5 skills that I believe are important going forward in our collective GIS journey. I'm going to put that in the chat box, if you don't mind, because I want to make sure that you know where it is, and so that you can either follow along while I'm going through some of the content, or you can investigate this more deeply on your own or share it with others that weren't able to be here today. Because I have more content here than we're going to be able to cover in the next 3 hours together. Just kidding, we don't have 3 hours. Just wanted to make sure you folks were on your toes. I'm basically southeast of you all, or most of you, here in Colorado. And I'm embarrassed to say that I've never been to Alberta. I know it's embarrassing as a geographer not to ever have been in Alberta. I know many faculty there, though, at Mount Royal University and elsewhere. And so I know I need to get up there. Maybe you folks can invite me face to face. On the other hand, after this presentation, you might be saying, we never want to have Joseph up in Alberta. It would be torture. Anyway, so hopefully, though, you'll invite me up there. The last time I was telling your wonderful hosts, the last time I was in Canada, I was at the International Statistics Conference in Ottawa. And of course, you would have done the same thing. Being in GIS, I thought, I'm only 5 kilometers from where Roger Tomlinson started the first GIS. So why don't I just walk in the opposite direction from my lodging after I got off work that day at the statistics conference? And I actually walked to the street where Geomatics Canada is. And there's also the Natural Resources Canada in the same block. There's the Remote Sensing Center of Canada. So sort of like GIS remote sensing holy ground. You know what I mean? It was completely, after hours, no building was open, but I ended up taking some videos and some pictures that you can find on my Our Earth website. Anyway, that was the last time I was in Canada. It was a great and grand and glorious time. Plus, I picked up Quebec because I walked across the bridge. So that counts in my geographic way of thinking. As long as you're leaving the airport grounds, the land area counts in your provinces, states, countries, web map. So I hope you agree with me that it was still okay for me to count that province, even though I basically walked about 300 meters in the province. Anyway, it was great, a grand and glorious time. So that's the story map that we're going to delve into. And I just want you to think about a couple of things as we get going. What moment brought you to working in GIS? Was it a teacher? Was it a professor? Was it a book you read? Was it a field experience like this child here having this field experience in Costa Rica? Was it someone that gave you a sort of a vision of your future self as a younger person? What brought you to this moment? Being the change agent, the positive change agent that you are, what made you think in the past, hey, I really want to care for the earth and its people, and I want to do so through geotechnologies? For many of you, you came into this from geo, enviro, GI science, like I did. I'm a geographer, and the number of people, though, in GIS, which is exciting and something we're going to talk about today, with that background is actually declining because there are more and more people from sociology, economics, computer science, engineering, you name it, right? They're coming into GIS, which is actually a good thing for our field. So the diversity of backgrounds is actually widening. I still submit that the geographic perspective and some fundamentals of geography are important no matter where you come from and into GIS. But think about your own unique experiences that you had and what nudged you. And, I'm in education, so I want you to think also about, what was the power of that instructor, that teacher, that guide, after school program, whatever it is that brought you into this, really had a big influence on you. And maybe some of you came into this because you've always loved maps, even paper maps that you may have navigated, been the family navigator on your trips in the past. Maybe you actually used paper maps like that. But in other words, somehow you wanted to make a positive difference in people's lives. You wanted to make a sustainable, resilient community for yourself, for your family, for your community. So somehow you journeyed to this point, and I salute you. And in my case, here's a geeky picture of me as a kid. In my case, I've always loved getting outside, exploring the landscape. I'm in Colorado, so just like Alberta, right? It's you got wonderful, amazing natural resources and places to explore. But I'll just share a little personal story here that I think it's important for you to critically evaluate data, maps, and also speakers now more than ever, right? I could be from anywhere, right? How are you going to know whether the things that Joseph says are something that you can trust, that you can actually use as a resource in the future? So I'm not the end all be all person in GIS. I'm very honored to be part of the community here, not just today, but going forward. Please feel free to get a hold of me. As long as you know how to spell my name, you're going to be able to find my website and contact information. But I want to share that my background for two reasons. Two reasons that I hope are encouraging. One, you don't have to stay at the same organization your whole career. As you can see in my case, I've been in federal agencies, private industry. I'm an independent consultant. I worked for Esri for 18 years. I know a lot of the Esri Canada staff, especially their education staff, great people. I've worked for nonprofits. I teach in universities and community and technical and tribal colleges. Anyway, so I have had lots of different positions and roles. So it shows that you don't have to be at the same organization your whole career. Nothing that's not noble about being in the same organization your whole career, but you don't have to. And then the second, hopefully encouraging note about my own background is for you all, is that geospatial technology and spatial thinking are going to be valuable no matter where you end up organization wise. So I'm hoping that's encouraging in two different ways. Now, my early geographic days, this was my front yard. So my parents owned this hotel, and maybe some of you have stayed at a Super 8 or something like that in the past, where there's an apartment right behind the front desk. That's the kind of childhood I had. But it instilled me in two different ways. One, I got to hear about the places that people traveled. These were simpler times, and us kids would be able to interact with the guests at our establishment. The second thing that, again, thinking about your own journey, how did you get to this point, was that I found out about different people and their backgrounds and loved hearing their stories. So that was the early geographic days, Western Colorado, land of the Ute Mountain Utes and the Southern Ute indigenous population, meeting people. And also what I spent a lot of time as a kid, besides getting out on the landscape, is making maps. So all my maps are of made up places. I had street names, address ranges, interchanges, railroad yards, bays and capes, estuaries, etc. on my maps. I know that's pretty geeky and nerdy, but I mean, what kid cares about address ranges? Look at these address ranges I had in the corner of my hand-drawn pencil maps, the 3500 North Block and the 4200 North Block. But you did some geeky, nerdy things as a kid too, and you still do some things that maybe nobody else in your circle of acquaintances likes to do, but treasure those things. Oftentimes I get I review job applications for different positions, at USGS, Esri, et cetera. And oftentimes people discount their sort of non-GIS experience. They say, I was in retail for 10 years. Well, you managed people, you managed a budget, you had supply chain issues, et cetera. So don't discount the non-GIS experience as well. And like many of you, I love getting out there on the landscape. All the pictures I have as a kid were of certain angles of buildings and landforms and things like that. I have very few people in my pictures. They're mostly, I got to get that angle just right. Love getting out there on the landscape. So think about that. But you have great GIS educational leaders in your part of the world, and I salute you all, and I thank you for involving me in the community. I do a lot of campus visits, and I know I'm talking a lot in this presentation, but about 35 campus visits a year, schools, tribal, technical, community colleges, universities. And I do a lot of listening. So I have a perspective on what's happening in education that we could talk about. How does it impact your future workforce? And things that we can sort of unpack and unravel here in the next short bit that we have together. And of course, I have a great love for regions around the world. And I just submit that you all are leaders. Again, you're making your, and I encourage you to think about articulating the value that you bring to your city, your county, your region, your administrative area, your national, state, provincial forests, et cetera. How you can articulate that, I think, is still important in our current age because everybody's got some mapping tool, some fitness app, some device, app where it's still rather misunderstood what you folks do and what you bring. So I encourage you to get that elevator speech down, your 1 minute, your 5 minute, your half hour workshop for your faculty, your staff, your others to articulate the value that you're bringing to the community. Yes, you and I know that you're deep in the throes of GIS, but you're making the water safer, right, and available. You're making the community safer, and the green spaces thriving, and the invasive species reduced, and all of that sort of thing that people can understand. So I encourage you to make sure that you keep those kinds of statements in mind, but also ready to go at a moment's notice when that person comes down the hall and gets you and taps you on the shoulder and says, we're having a budget meeting about your position over the next year, and you need to tell us why we should fund you for the next year. That still happens. And in these budgetary constricted times, I think that's still going to happen despite the rising geo-awareness, which is one of the forces I'll talk about here in a moment. But I just encourage you also in this short time that we have together to think about what do you want to see in society? Geotechnologies will continue. So those of you that are new to the community, you wonder, is this going to be something I can actually latch onto for the bulk of my career or the whole rest of my career? Yes. Unless we magically solve all the UN SDGs tomorrow, right? All the sustainable development goals, and one of your leaders at URISA, Alberta, and I had a chat about this at the AGU Science Conference in December. But unless we magically solve all of those problems tomorrow, geotechnologies and the whys of where are still going to be relevant, right? We're still going to be needed to look at energy and health and water and population change and natural resources and supply chain and all the rest of it. And here's another thing that I want you to think about. And I have this graphic to sort of support this. But we do feel empowered by the data sets, the tools, the other things that we have at our fingertips now especially with modern web-based GIS. But we also feel rather vulnerable, rather challenged over the last 5 years, let's say, right? Not just from COVID and other health-related things, but also natural hazards. I mean, you folks, us, others have had lots of wildfires and other things going on. So how do we navigate the waters and still feel that we're making a positive contribution and feel encouraged and can be able to encourage others in this area? Because it's easy to get a bit overwhelmed, isn't it, with all the things that we have to deal with from local to global level, right? So you do have a key role in this decade. Also, I would submit that as AI tools become more and more part of our standard GIS toolkit, we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well, that you still will have an important role despite the advent of geo AI tools. Also, I would also just want to say that you're revolutionary. I've got a whole book on that topic called Interpreting Our World, where it's 100 discoveries, people, ideas, technologies that have revolutionized geography, but also revolutionized our whole world and our decision-making processes. So changing the way we see the world is your job. It's not just that you're working on parcels or habitat or open space or zoning, right? You're actually helping people to envision a better future. And that is important. Again, I salute you all. And we're going to focus a little bit on education. Why should you care about what's happening in education? Well, you've got kids. You were a kid. You've got an alma mater. You have a school down the street from your house or your apartment that you care about. If none of those apply, I know a few of them will. You all were kids at one point. You all went through the educational system. You care about the future workplace in your organization, your government agency, your independent business, your nonprofit, or your academic institution. You care about the future people working there. So you care about the future workforce and you want to encourage that. What should we be teaching? How should we be teaching and enabling that future workforce that actually anticipates some of the workforce demands and not just reflects past demands? And also builds these positive change agents like you all are. So what do we want that landscape to look like? Well, as promised, I have organized this presentation into a set of 3 chunks of 5. And hopefully you're not texting the URISA Alberta people saying, this is the most boring presentation ever. We never want to have Joseph back on in our community again. There's lots we could talk about in the future, but hopefully you're not saying that. But one of them is the 5, what I consider to be 5 forces. And you may say, hey, Joseph, you're forgetting about this one. And that's fine. You know, this is sort of like the 5 coolest places to visit in Alberta before you pass away. You know, or the 5 coolest bands of all time. Did you ever have debates with your high school friends about that? You know, you'd never win that argument, but you'd argue for a while about the coolest bands ever. So this is sort of like that in the sense that it's debatable and worthy of discussion. I'm not saying this is the only 5 forces, but these are things that we could chew on anyway. One of them is geo-awareness. I touched on this earlier, where more and more people in general society outside of our GIS community are aware of things that you and I care about. Water, energy, hazards, et cetera, right? Some of the things that we've encountered as societies over the last decade or more are things that people are now talking about. In my early days of my career, it was really just this community talking about those things. And maybe occasionally you'd hear people talking about hazards and water and energy and things like that. But now it's in general conversation. So people are aware of these issues and that they are serious and they affect people's lives from global to local levels, and that we need to do something about them. And then secondly, geo-enablement is what I mean by that is that people are at least aware and enabled to use some of the tools that you and I use. They may not call them geotechnologies or GIS or geomatics or whatever phrase you want to use, location analytics, et cetera, but they are at least enabled to use some of these tools. They have a fitness app. They track a friend coming in to the Edmonton airport, right, on Flight Tracker or some other tool. They've got a navigation aid that they use when they're hiking or when they're going across campus or across your community, right, or something else. They're tracking a package. Right, there's so many, the bus lines. There's so many things in our society, right, that are that people are at least they touch on and they're enabled to use in their everyday lives. And then the center hexagon there, the geotechnologies in the cloud, I submit to you all that that was pretty revolutionary. Now we're still making progress there. Not every single GIS tool is cloud enabled, but having the ability to share and collaborate across disciplinary borders and across political borders and across physical borders, that really was a huge leap forward in GIS. Some of you may remember, or maybe you've read in textbooks of the early clunky days of GIS when it was very difficult for people to share data, share methods, share workflows with each other. That was very, very difficult to do. We had physical media and all kinds of other constraints, file sizes. And I'm not going to say that all of those constraints are gone, but we do have the ability to collaborate. And sure, there's some things that you probably are in your mind right now and are in my mind. That shouldn't be that clunky still. In the year 2025, that shouldn't be that clunky. But we've made lots of progress. I'll also say this. The first time that you used docs.com or box.com or Dropbox or some Google Drive or to collaborate on a paper or some document that you're working on with a colleague or set of colleagues. Wasn't that revolutionary? It was like, wow, we don't have to email it back and forth. We can actually multiple editors. Yeah, that was pretty amazing, a leap forward. And also the first time you had, you know, ABBA's greatest hits in the cloud, or Gordon Lightfoot, or the Guess Who, or Rush. Those are Canadians. Awesome. Awesome bands. Anyway, the point is the first time you had Rush 2112 on your streaming device, wasn't that cool? Ooh, I submit that GIS in the cloud is even better than having, with all apologies to Geddy Lee, having Rush online and having Docs online, because geotechnologies online was, again, collaboration, sharing, working on problems across multiple boundaries. That was revolutionary. And again, we're still working on that, right? But that was huge. Citizen, community, crowdsourcing, whatever phrase you want to use there, I submit is also one to consider in these 5 forces. Having people collect data on pine beetles or water quality or sightings of wildlife or litter or something like that, or broken sidewalks in their community, et cetera. Power outages. That's amazingly powerful, right? Be able to submit data, for example, ArcGIS Survey 123, iNaturalist, and other tools where you can submit data. You can map it easily and then gain insights through a dashboard, a story map, instant app, et cetera. That is a very strong force in our world. And you think about 8 billion potentially humans collecting data and using it for good. And then finally, storytelling. This whole thing, as you know from the chat box there, is a story map. It's a story map. It's a kind of web mapping application, right, that has multimedia elements, and I'm using it so that you can actually engage with it later on, and I've shared it with everyone. So it incorporates that sharing as well in this set of 5 forces, which I hope are helpful. Hope they're helpful. We can have another chat about that. And also, I promised your organizers that I chat briefly about some key trends. Again, these aren't the end all be all. And you could say, hey, Joseph, you're missing this one or that one. But we've had 3D visualization for a long time in GIS, but now we have 3D analytics, right, folks? We have 3D analytics, which makes sense because we have a 3D world. We want to be able to look at things in 3D, not just necessarily the terrain, but what if we wanted to look at crime in 3D or invasive species in 3D, et cetera? Now we have at least some 3D analytical capabilities at our fingertips, some of which are actually in the cloud, which is interesting too. And then for many years, the interior space mapping people, the BIM CAD community, building information management, computer-aided drafting and design, and the GIS community were sort of like speaking Spanish and Portuguese. We sort of understood a few words in common, but we were largely 2 separate communities with our own languages. And now I'm not going to say they're completely merged, but they are at least talking with each other, and we have common tools that we can use with both communities. So the architecture, engineering, construction, BIM, CAD, and GIS people can actually use some of the same tools like ArcGIS Urban to solve some problems, which makes sense if we have a mandate, for example, to design some sort of resilient downtown or center city for Grand Prairie or wherever you folks are calling in from, or a university campus or some other place. We want to be able to integrate the interior and the exterior spaces, right? So we can design this. Okay, what happens if there's a severe weather event at 3 p.m., 1500 on a Friday? Who's on campus? Who's in that office building, a set of office buildings downtown, et cetera? How do we build that without having the interior and the exterior spaces in a system that is interoperable? So that's an exciting leap forward. Also, an exciting trend, the Internet of Things, real-time data feeds of wildfire perimeters, traffic, stream gauges, et cetera. That is great to have at our fingertips now. Still, again, a long way to go before we have all the data available at our fingertips for anything that we want in the world, but that's an exciting development. Oftentimes, maybe you get this question as well. Hey, Joseph, I'll hear from people. Hasn't everything already been mapped? I mean, people have been mapping for hundreds of years. I mean, going back to the Babylonian clay tablets from thousands of years ago, right? Al-Idrisi's map on 2 big plates of silver from the 1100s. That would have been a hard map to fold. Get it? Hard map to fold. So 2 big plates of silver. Etched into cave walls on wood blocks. And then the beginning of the 20th century on copper plates, like from the Canadian Geological Survey, the US Geological Survey, and other mapping agencies, and then reproduced onto paper. And then in our own century, digital. And if we want the physical paper documents, we go from the digital to the paper instead of what we did in the 20th century, go from the paper to the digital. Interesting kind of reversal there. But the point is, we've been mapping for a long time. Haven't all the maps been made? No. And as you well know, there are several reasons. We want to map things in real time. We want to map things at a higher resolution, a larger scale than ever before. We want to map new things that we haven't mapped before, right? The frontiers of mapping. We want to map craters on Mars all the way from there to organs in our own bodies, right? So medical mapping, maps of the brain and the heart, et cetera. So extremely local to interstellar. So we haven't made all of them. And when we've got data, we want to update it. So the world is a dynamic planet that we live on, right? It's to be a different situation. If you or I, we'd probably be out of a job if we were mapping Mercury, right? Every so often there's a meteorite that hits the surface of Mercury. You know, there's not much else happening. But here on the Earth, we've got 8 billion humans shaping the planet. We've got natural forces. We've got the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, the lithosphere, all interacting. And enterprise and web GIS is another, I think, trend where we want to have these things interoperable between organizations, government agencies, nonprofits, private industry. And we want to be able to configure these systems so that they talk to each other, especially pertinent in times of some sort of hazard or disaster. I mean, think about the Calgary floods from what, 10 years ago now. Oh, gracious. You've got to have, all those agencies working together because lives are at stake, property's at stake, et cetera. So the enterprise notion, but also web GIS, right? Being able to serve up your results so that other people can consume them somehow with a web mapping application, story map, and experience builder, or some custom tool that you've created. GIS is a platform now, right? People can build on it. That's the whole nature of the platform, the whole meaning of the platform. And then AI and machine learning, interesting. I touched on this earlier. I really believe that your role as GIS professionals is going to be even more important in the future because AI is bringing more and more people into GIS, or using GIS. They might not even call it GIS. It might be a tool on some other package or application that they're using, but it's a GIS tool and it's enabled by AI. So as we go forward, people being able to extract features from imagery easily with these AI tools. There's a Survey 123 AI assistant, as you may know, that's give me a tree survey for downtown Grand Prairie. Okay, done. 15 questions. If I don't like question number 9, I can go ahead and substitute my own question in place of the AI generated question, but you don't have to create all these things from scratch. And in Business Analyst Web App, for example, part of the ArcGIS platform, there is an AI assistant there too. Give me a median age and median income map for census tracts in Lethbridge. Done. You don't have to know where all those buttons are. So the people that have said to you and I in the past, I don't have time to learn GIS because I don't have time to deal with all that interface stuff. They won't have to. They don't have to because they have some of these tools. And once the AI assistant migrates from Business Analyst Web App into ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro, again, it's going to be a game changer with many more people using the tools, not knowing much about the interface, and also not knowing what you folks know about projections and data quality and understanding the metadata and all that other stuff that you folks know. They're going to need your input because they won't have the background, but they want to use the tools for some sort of specific need in their organization. So again, I think your role is going to be even more important as we go forward in this AI-enabled world. It's an exciting time, but it's also one that we want to be thoughtful about and encourage people to use these tools wisely. More about that we could say as well, of course, but I think we're in sort of phase 2 of GIS, whereas in the past, as you know, we could do things like this. Hey, I want to look at a serious issue that perhaps has impacted your family, it's impacted mine. So it's a personal issue. Okay, traffic accidents, injuries, etc. We could do this kind of thing for a while, right? We could say, oh, for this county in Florida, I can map all of the traffic accidents and do a filter and maybe make a graduated color or a graduated symbol map on the types of crash, whether there are any substances involved, et cetera. But now what we can do, right, is we can run that through a statistical connection and use R or other statistics package or spatial statistics to come up with hexagons. And then I'm going to extrude those hexagons into 3D. And now every project has a constraint on several of one of or more variables, 3 key things being staff, budget, and time. So you've got some constraints there. If you only have time, budgeted staff to look at the top traffic accidents, you're going to run it through this model. Say, I want to look at the consecutive hotspots where there's statistically more accidents than other intersections in my community. So I'm going to focus on these towers, these hexagonal towers that have this bright red at the top. That's what I'm going to focus on. And if I can reduce the traffic accidents in those locations, then okay, maybe I've got additional funding and staff and time to address some of the other ones. But that's just a concrete example, right, that we could talk about for the next hour, that you folks in the community have lots more examples of how you've actually made the water safer, how you've made the community safer, et cetera, more sustainable, the air quality, et cetera, better with the application of these tools. So this is, to me, what I mean by this sort of phase 2. Think about this, folks. Exactly 100 years ago, as 1924 turned into 1925, we had another big paradigm shift in terms of how we envisioned our place in the world. And that was when the imagery from telescopes showed us that, you know what, that fuzzy thing up in the sky is not a dust cloud rotating around the Milky Way. That is an entirely separate galaxy. That's the Andromeda Galaxy. It's bigger than the Milky Way, even. It's 2.5 times bigger than the Milky Way. And then our perception of, oh my gosh, the size of the universe just greatly expanded. I feel like exactly 100 years later, we're in this sort of phase 2 now of GIS, where we thought it was big and important and influential before for its first, 60 years? We're coming up on 1967 to 2027, 60 years of GIS. So, okay, we are poised now, I think, that GIS with AI and some of the trends and forces I talked about is going to be much more influential and important going forward. That's good, right? Because we do believe that GIS helps us to make wiser, smarter decisions. But that's exciting, and it's going to be a big paradigm shift. So touching on what I was indicating before and just building a little bit on that, and feel free to put some questions in the chat box too, folks. I think it's important that you have your elevator speech. As I mentioned earlier, I have my Our Earth video channel, and it is right here. It's a little geeky, but I have 7,000 videos on it. And that's all about, as you can see here, some GIS things, but also landscapes, wildlife, other things in there. And one of the things I have in there is about 10 videos on actual, elevator speeches with me in actual elevators, which is embarrassing for someone else getting into an elevator with me when I'm filming one of these things, of course. But the point is, you can watch those for some inspiration, but make it your own voice, right? Make it your own voice, articulated in the way that you think is important. Why your job matters and why it needs to be supported and funded. So have that ready to go. I just highly encourage you and advocate for you to do that. Also, I would encourage you to not stop at the map. Oftentimes I get these URLs from people. Hey, Joseph, I got my data mapped. And I'll say, that's fantastic. And why do I say and? It's not to shame them or put them down. It's just that the map is an enabler, right? Is the first step in understanding something in a deeper, richer way. You want to be able to map and study and analyze and run various spatial stats and other spatial analysis tools on your data. But the map is the first step, right, into further insights and actionable decisions. So don't just stop at the map. I know you folks get it, but oftentimes maybe you need to share that with your colleagues. Also, don't get too attached to the tools. We get into discussion, and a couple of us are having a discussion before the webinar started today about, some of the things we're doing with ArcGIS Enterprise and the Experience Builder and some other tools that we've got at our fingertips, which is wonderful. But this is an actual picture that I took in an actual high school where I was running a geotechnology club after school. Some of you may know what this is. Feel free to put it in the chat box. But the point I'm making here is that it's a doorstop now. Okay, at one time it was part of someone's treasured computer architecture, and it probably cost about $3,000 in the late 1980s. Again, feel free to put it in the chat box if you know what it is. But the point is, the tools evolve. This tool right here is the most important tool of all, your spatially enabled brain. So keep that one nurtured and moving forward. And again, salute you all because you've got URISA Alberta and you've got this wonderful community here that you're already lifelong learners, right? You're going to events when you can, you're networking with each other, you're doing all the right things. But maybe a note for your colleagues that get a little bit wrapped up into the version that they're using. Whatever tool people want to use that helps them to understand and make smarter decisions. Thanks, Angela. Yep, you got it. It's a Mac SE from probably $3,000 in 1988, which was a lot of money then. It was still a lot of money now, but back then it was a significant part of your income for the year. Anyway, the point is, whatever tool that you feel is helping you to understand and make better decisions, use it. Okay. I don't want to get into an argument about this version or this software versus that. I think they can all be valuable in some way. So choose wisely. We can't learn them all, but I spent 18 years at Esri. So naturally I use a lot of Esri technologies and tools. I think they're a wonderful platform. And I have enormous respect for the organization. But think about what tools, even in the Esri toolbox, you're going to use. There's a lot of tools in there. What are you going to learn? And then what do you rely on other people to help you with when you feel that you need to learn this tool? Instead of you developing deep and rich expertise, tap into someone else's deep and rich expertise and learn enough about it so that you can overcome that hurdle in your own decision making. I also submit to you all that the stool of geoliteracy that we need to impart to our colleagues too, that let's say you're new to GIS or you're a student or you know students that you want to share this with. It's not just about the skills, and the skills is that center leg there that I have in this diagram. And it's not just GIS skills, it's framing a problem, coming up with a solution, looking at alternatives, presenting your information, communicating the results of your research, et cetera. So it's a lot of skills, but also the content knowledge matters. Sometimes people say, Joseph, you know, you're in GIS education and all you care about is helping people use the tools. No, it's never been about the tools. It's never been about pushing this button or that button. It's about, again, getting them to think critically and wisely and spatially and holistically, right? That the atmosphere is connected to the lithosphere, is connected to the anthroposphere. And that's why, in part, I work a lot with tribal colleges and First Nations and tribal communities and schools because they really understand the whole holistic nature, which I think needs to spread into the general population a bit more. But if people understand the connections and the value of thinking holistically, that is really important to society, right? There's a lot of people that are very, very good at their own piece of research, right? Their own thing that they're really passionate about. This type of soil, right? And this kind of wetland, or this kind of climatic regime, or this kind of transportation. And it's good to be specialized. You know, we need that in our society, but we also need you all to keep encouraging people to be thinking holistically. So if we alter this variable over here in our community, this one could be potentially affected. And that's, to me, what we need in the 21st century. People that can see the possible connections and be able to make smart decisions, knowing that it's usually not this decision is 100% good and there's no negative externalities with that decision. It's okay, this one is going to be, there's going to be some negativity here, but this is the best way forward given all these alternatives. And these are the things that are going to be affected by this decision. And also that left leg of that geoliteracy stool, I think, is important too. The geographic perspective. And this goes for if you come into this from IT or systems or engineering or water quality, the geographic perspective is still important, even if you're not a geographer. Okay, so that's why it's geographic information systems or geotechnologies, because it's anchored to real places and real people and real lives. So I would just submit that this is important and perhaps something useful for you to go forward. I've got some things in here about the workforce, but just to give you a little bit of background here of where I'm coming from with this, here's one of my studies. My own research is about teaching and learning with GIS, as you probably can imagine. So this is one of my articles about, okay, I really want to contribute back to the community. So you think about how can you contribute to your communities? This is the way that I feel I can make the biggest contribution is through GIS education. Now, one of the things that's happening is in the world of education, as you know, there are some demographic changes, there's funding changes, right? There are departments that have merged, that have had to merge or combine or rebrand. But I really believe that with innovation, or sorry, with challenges and chaos, and education, just like many other, major structures in society, has always been in rather a state of chaos and confusion, and constant reinvention. And so nowadays is no different in that respect. But if someone's going to hold on to, our department has always been called geomatics or geography or environmental science, and it has to be that way for the next 100 years. Well, I'm not sure if that's going to work anymore. I think people have to be innovative to chart these waters of education. There's changing expectations of society in what we want from our educational institutions that plays a key role too. So some universities and colleges are going with micro-credentials. And what about this? How about all those people out there that, have some college background? They have a couple courses or a year or two, and they felt disenfranchised with the educational system, or they maybe need another degree or a credential or something to get to the next level in their job or to do the things that they've always wanted to do. What if we tried to, in our educational systems, go after those people and attract them to campuses? And as you know, the reality is many people actually can't go to a physical campus anymore. And so how about hybrid, flex, online courses, et cetera? So those are just some of the things to think about and why I'm so passionate about encouraging faculty and teachers in the K-12 schools to use these tools, again, to help their students to be positive change agents going forward. So there's lots of text in here. But here's one of the things that I use that I created with a colleague of mine, and this is about a short-term goal and a longer-term goal. That's always the case with geotechnologies. So in this particular case, we created this story map that the short-term goal is we wanted to have students understand how to put, and I'm not sure if these audio files will come through. Not sure if you could hear that or not, but the point is we got an English word and a Lakota word for major landforms, human constructed objects on the landscape, etc. So we wanted to have those students understand how to build one of these and to put, thanks, Kristen, for verifying. But also, we want to encourage them in the bigger, higher, more noble goals, which were, hey, if I can easily embed an audio file into a story map, couldn't I have tribal elders and others talk about why this place actually matters in the past and at present in their community? And an even higher, more noble goal than that is to draw attention to endangered indigenous languages, which, as you probably know, is a huge issue globally. So there's always a higher, more noble goal, whether it's water quality or more, better transportation systems for your community or whatever it is. Right. So the short-term goal was, okay, we wanted to use story maps and audio files, but again, there was a higher, more noble goal there, and there almost always is. So this is some of my, my points for instructors, just FYI, that one of the things is they don't need to, and I think this goes for you in the community as well. You don't have to create all of your own lessons for your faculty, your coworkers in your city government, et cetera. There's no shortage of resources out there. Learn.arcgis.com. There's books, there's tutorials, there's lots of good content. Sure, weigh it carefully, understand how it fits or doesn't fit into your own needs for your organization, and then craft it, modify it as necessary. But you don't have to start from scratch every time. There are some decent resources, and probably equally importantly, depending on the library that they come from, but they're oftentimes updated. So you know how there's always that tension if you use a textbook from 2020 and you've got the software has advanced, the tools have advanced, and that the screenshots don't exactly match. What I try to impart to people is that don't get too wrapped up in the screen captures because the software changes. If that button to do a buffer or proximity is not over here, it's over here now, or next year it's going to be over here, don't worry about that. Plus, another aspect of that, the most important thing is understand what proximity and buffering are, and then you'll find the tool. Or if you don't know where the tool are, touching on what I was saying earlier, the AI tools will say, okay, here's the buffer tool, and this is how to use it, and here's where it is. Or I'm going to run the buffer tool for you. Interesting. So we're getting a little bit as at a point to where we can detach a bit from the software, which is again a very interesting situation that we're in. I've got some. We're running a bit short on time, so I'm going to skip through these. But I've got a couple of pieces of student work. I know you had a couple of students on here last month or last quarter, and I was talking to Kristen and others about this. That I would have loved to see, but maybe I can watch the recordings because I love seeing student work. But here's one on UAVs and GIS. Here's a study from a middle school student in Canada about right whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and I love that one, especially because at the end the student actually. I'm from a landlocked state, so this is kind of foreign territory to me. What do I know about lobster traps? But apparently a lot of these whales were getting caught in these lobster traps. So I love how the student looked at the situation, but then came up with a solution. This is a middle school student. So I just love that whole, oh, let's take action. Let's propose a solution now for the situation. So that's exciting. There are some there's much progress in GIS and education at primary, secondary, university level. When primary and secondary, just in case you get this from colleagues, hey, Joseph and others in GIS education, they're trying to get these little kids to do kriging and tessellations. No. It's mostly focusing on teaching about history, math, geography, biomes, water resources, right? River systems, and those major themes that teachers have to teach anyway, but to teach it in an engaging way using GIS as a tool and also as a resource. For example, the Living Atlas of the World, all those apps in there about water balance, wildfire perimeters, et cetera, using those. So Yeah, very exciting. So that's what I wanted to just let you know. At the university level, it's actually both. It's the teaching with GIS in economics, business, data science. I'm always trying to get those data science people say, hey, there's a geo part of the data science. Don't forget the geo part. And there's also GI science programs in universities and colleges too. There have been for 50 years now, and there will be going forward. So there's two sort of strands in the university level. That first one is actually has potential for much more growth. We can get all the business students, just as one example, to use GIS in their location analytics or supply chain courses or something like that, business management. That's huge. Just think of the number of business grads every year. If they're using some sort of location analytics, that's awesome. And every one of those businesses out there, probably many that you're familiar with as well, they'll have to have a sustainability plan. If they don't have one now, they'll have to have one in the future. Who better to get them there and to help them with that plan than one of these graduates from one of these schools of business that actually has some geospatial technology on their tool belt. So that's pretty exciting. Now, just wanted to close with a couple comments for you folks out there working with GIS day to day. And maybe some of you only touch this a couple times a week, but no matter where you are in this journey, you may have times where, oh gosh, Joseph, yeah, GIS is evolving rapidly. I fortunately have the URISA Alberta community, but I do feel a bit inadequate at my job oftentimes. I read a book about a year ago from a author that all of you know. And the author at the end says, I don't feel quite arrived yet at my profession. I don't quite feel like I'm there yet. It was Paul McCartney's A to Z lyrics book. So if Sir Paul doesn't feel like he's arrived at being an adequate songwriter, it's okay for you and I to have moments where we don't feel 100% adequate. So I just wanted to share that with you. It just blew my mind that I saw that right at the end there. I promised your organizers that I'd talk about the 5 skills, and I'm going to wrap up with the 5 skills here that I feel are important for us as a community to keep in mind as we go forward. Be curious. Now, many of you already had that background. You've always been curious about the world and its people and landscapes and what's the relationship of this variable to that variable, but keep that nurtured. And that leads to you being tenacious with the tools, but also with the questions. Ask questions, you students out there, ask questions your professor's not even asking you. Ooh. And when you're in the workplace, ask questions that your supervisor, your team lead is not even asking you. Those are the kind of valuable employees that organizations want. And that leads you to be tenacious. Friday afternoon, 3 p.m.aprx. Friday, final.aprx. Right, folks? You know what I mean. It's the tenacious aspect of our work. And also being able to work with data and being critical of it. How do I know if I can trust that map or that data set or that layer? Ooh, I have a whole blog on that. It's called Spatial Reserves. Feel free to go to Spatial Reserves right now. Every week or 2 weeks, I've got an essay on location privacy, ethics, data quality, where to find data, how to assess its quality, et cetera, that I hope are good conversation starters for you to think about, especially as you share this with coworkers and colleagues. And knowing your geospatial and geotechnical foundations, I think, is important, especially for this community. Again, there's going to be this avalanche. It's already starting to see this avalanche of people from outside of our community starting to use this tool. It's just as one short example, I got a call from a university saying, hey, Joseph, we've heard about this thing called story maps, and we're a fine arts department on a university campus. Can you teach those workshops on story maps so we can placify or spacify our art, our histories, our narratives, our paintings? And so I said, sure. But I also said, I'm not just going to focus on story maps. I'm going to talk to you about how to use layers and how to integrate and geo-register your data so that you got a more complete with a set of maps and visualizations of what you're passionate about, your art in this case. So I learned about the fine arts community in that college, and hopefully I got them thinking spatially about not just using maps as reference documents, like where was the historical trail across our region, et cetera, but also maps as analytical tools that they can use to move forward. So that's just an example of additional communities coming to us and saying, hey, we've heard about this little piece, the survey 123 thing. How do I use that? So it's a good opportunity for us to get them. And, I didn't avalanche those people with, you need to know about geodatabases first, and you need to know about, a feature class. And no, I started with what they're interested in and then pick the tools that they're just getting what they need to move forward. And hopefully that'll spark their interest. Ooh, what else can I do with this? And then also giving back to the community. Who can I mentor? I think we're very good at that as the community, but this red text, who can I connect with to receive mentorship? I think sometimes as a GIS community, we're very good about sharing with others, but sometimes when we feel a little hesitant to ask for help for ourselves. So I just encourage you to do that and use the GTCM as a guide to help you identify what gaps you have in your own knowledge. Be adaptable, be flexible. I love this Ikigai diagram from the Japanese. Am I at the center of this every day on the job? Well, no, but I try to be there. What do I love to do? What are you good at? What can you be paid for to supply, provide for your families, et cetera? And what does the world need? Try to get at the center of that. So keep this somehow close by. Tack it up on your wall, put it on your phone, whatever. I love that one. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the good communications and the elevator speech and being able to articulate what you do and why it matters. So in conclusion, I believe that this decade is very exciting for geotechnologies. And you all y'all, ustedes, vous, tú, okay? You all have a key role in achieving that goal, that we will have this healthier, happier, more resilient, more sustainable future. Comments, questions? Oh, this is so geeky. Look at this picture here. Comments, questions, complaints? I'd love to hear from you folks. You're being awfully quiet.
Wow. That's great. I really enjoyed this. So I don't know if I have any questions here. I do see one question. Oh, no, not a question in the chat here, but another comment on a wonderful presentation, and thank you.
Thanks, Brett. Much appreciated.
Yeah. Definitely touched on a few things that I have been interested in, and the story map you showed me, or you showed of the language and the locations for that. That is so close to something that got me interested in GIS in the very beginning. So that brought me back to that.
Yeah, yeah. And I particularly love how Joseph was able to use story maps as a tool to engage with folks about first indigenous communities, and that too educative piece, right? And trying to demystify the science. I think that's awesome.
Thanks, Dr. O. Much appreciated. And thanks for inviting me. It's great to have some contact with your community. And again, I hope that we can have an ongoing relationship outside of this particular session today. If there's any, assistance I can provide or further expansion on any of these ideas and ways that the community might get involved with their own alma mater, school down the street from their house, et cetera, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely. We're going to take you up on that, Dr. J.
Thanks, Dr. O. Awesome. All right, folks, I want to be sensitive to your time. And I know Kristen and Dr. O probably have things to talk about for what's coming up in the community. So I'll just stand by. But again, thanks. And it was a huge honor.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you everybody for joining us for this webinar. And we have some more exciting webinars coming up later this year that Alex is going to speak about. So I'll turn it over to Alex, and thanks for joining, and watch for the advertisement of the next one on LinkedIn. So we'll be posting the link to register soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. Thanks again, Dr. J. You've been awesome. I spoke earlier, right? Met you for the first time in person at the AGU last year, and you were so receptive and offered to be one of our speakers this year. Just, yeah, a big shout out from us here at URISA Alberta. Awesome presentation. So, folks, next month, May 30th to be precise, we'll be having our next guest speaker. He's Kyunsheng Wu, an assistant professor at the University of Colorado, and he'll be speaking on the use of open source tools and data for environmental monitoring. It's going to be an awesome demonstration session. Dr. Wu specializes in geospatial data science, and he's developed loads and loads of open source tools. So it's going to be a hands-on, engaging session. We'll be looking at stuff with Google Earth Engine, Python APIs. So it's going to accommodate both folks that are already in this, utilizing some of these tools. And if you want to utilize these tools, it's going to be a nice learning session. So we look forward to having you. Like Kristen mentioned earlier, we'll be posting the invite to the meeting on LinkedIn, so please be on the lookout. Also, when you see the post on LinkedIn, please share, invite all the folks on your network, invite your colleagues in the office, your classmates, and we'll be really glad to have you on board. So we'd just like to thank you, and yeah, hope you have an awesome day. Kristen, are you good? Do you have anything to say?
I'm good. I don't have anything left, but I'll stick around if anybody's got any other questions or comments.
Yep. I think we're good. Okay,
Thanks.
awesome.